Suppose you got a notice from the power company that said they're going to reroute their power lines, and unfortunately next month you're going to be without electricity for a week. And you know that wintertime's coming, and you want to be able to come home from work and bathe in warm water at the end of the day. But you'll have no electricity. But you're very mechanically inclined, and you're not stupid. And you realize I've got a huge tank in which I can store water. So I'll have plenty of water. So much so that I can easily use a lot of it for bathing, and still have plenty left over for washing pots and pans and for cooking and drinking and making coffee. I have plenty of water. But what I want to do is effortlessly heat this water, and I only need hot water at the end of the day when I come home from work. I've got a nasty job. I'll be dirty, and I want to bathe. And I don't want to bathe in cold water. I've got plenty of water. I just want an easy way to heat it without electricity. And I don't care to get a gas water heater just for a week. I only need this water for a week, and then the power will be back on. So you could build an enclosure out in the yard around a bathtub filled with water. Build a wall around it. So you have, in effect, a little bathroom. Except for the roof, you put a sheet of clear plastic over it. And suppose you know that during this month that the power will be out, you will have plenty of sunshine. Do you suppose that between the time of 10 o'clock in the morning and 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, the sun be shining on your little bathroom, shining through the clear plastic on the ceiling, the roof, heating the air inside that bathroom, and that water would slowly absorb that heat? It would take several hours to heat the water, but you've got it rigged where you hope that the temperature in that little enclosure will get rather hot, kind of like a car parked in the sun with the windows rolled up. I would imagine that if you did it correctly, didn't use too much water, and your bathroom, your makeshift bathroom was not too large, and suppose you painted the walls and the floor black, and there are no trees to block the sunlight. Suppose you made it somewhat larger in dimensions than required, but you made the walls 5 feet tall. So you'd have a whole lot of exposure to the sun relative to the size, the cubic footage area inside that would need to be heated. You would do everything you can to encourage that little enclosure to become like a solar cooker. I suppose if you didn't put too much water in your bathtub and the sun was shining bright, that at the end of the day, what was cool water would become at least tepid and at least bearable, where you could bathe in it comfortably. It wouldn't be steaming hot necessarily. You could expect the temperature to rise noticeably. You put a thermometer in there, and suppose the temperature in the morning was 40 degrees, and outdoors the temperature of the atmosphere was 40 degrees, and you knew it would rise up to around 60, 65 during the day. The high would be 60 or 65, and it would drop off. By the time you'd be coming up from work, the air would be cooling, but your little enclosure would have had a chance to absorb some radiation from the sun into your solar oven / bathroom, you could expect that water, it would take a lot of heat over a long many hours, and it would have an effect on that water in your bathtub. If you did it correctly, you could expect the water to at least be tepid. If the water was originally 40 degrees, maybe you can warm it up to 60 degrees. Because if the atmosphere was 60 or 65, you could expect the temperature of the air in your little enclosure, catching all that solar energy, to rise up to around 100 degrees. In a room 100 degrees, the air exposed to that water in your bathtub would absorb some of that, and it would warm. But we don't know if it'll warm enough. We're hoping it'll at least get tepid. We really fully expect it to warm some. Of course, there are better, easier ways to warm water with solar energy than to put it in a bathtub and your bathtub inside of an enclosure. You could warm it with solar heat more effectively in a smaller box that was more efficient at trapping with double insulated glass. Matter of fact, I've not seen it, but I've heard that some businesses that use a lot of hot water, say like a laundromat, can preheat water with a solar collector on the roof before it goes to the water heater to heat it up to whatever temperature it should be to wash clothes. You can preheat your cold water before sending it to the water heater and thus save on your power bill. If you use a lot of hot water, that would make sense, and I believe it would be efficient and practical. But could the ocean do the similar thing if heat were trapped? You got the same amount of heat coming in as going out, and some of it is trapped by the atmosphere, the troposphere, the lower layer where the water vapor is and where the clouds are. That's the troposphere. That's where your weather happens. If some kind of greenhouse gas were to be added to that troposphere, it would prevent some of the solar energy from escaping into space. That heat gain would in fact be transferred to the water, the oceans. And perhaps the heat of the air in that solar oven / climate system would not warm that much, but the heat would be transferred to the water, and the water wouldn't warm very much because it warms very slowly because of a principle known as specific heat of water. It takes a lot of heat to warm water 1 degree. 1 degree in temperature rise, 1 calorie in, 1 degree of heat, a certain amount of water. That is the definition of specific heat. The lefties have glommed onto that I've just said, the principle of water absorbing heat. So if man added greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, the trapped heat would be transferred to the ocean, and the atmosphere need not warm up that much because most of the heat would be transferred to the oceans, to the water. So it sounds to me like they've got a plausible explanation for why your catastrophic man-made carbon dioxide has not heated the atmosphere even more. It's because all along from the beginning, starting 200 years ago, as soon as some industrialist, capitalist SOBs even thought of burning coal in their factories with which to enslave and exploit mankind through a labor force paid low wages and worked to death for nothing. When these greedy bastards, I call them, first had the idea of using machinery powered by steam engines heated by coal, as soon as that idea popped into their heads, as soon as the idea of burning coal popped into their heads 200 years ago, the oceans began to warm, and they've been warming ever since. It could be that the sun brightened, and that's why we're no longer in the temperatures of the Little Ice Age. It could be that the sun warmed us out of the Little Ice Age, and in the process the ocean was warmed, and matter of fact, that's where the CO2 is coming from, perhaps. So it still could be natural, whichever way you want to look at it. It could be natural, or it could be man-made. What they're saying now is the heat has been trapped all along in the oceans, going back to the very beginning of the Industrial Revolution. That heat was being transferred into the oceans. The oceans have been heating up ever since man first hatched the idea of burning the first bit of coal in his factory. So capitalists are to blame, and this is their reason for wanting to shut down capitalism. These anti-capitalists perhaps came out of the Eastern European countries after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when the Berlin Wall came down, so to speak. Some freedom-loving people came out and were happy, but some dyed-in-the-wool anti-capitalists who had totally consumed the Kool-Aid, drained every drop of Kool-Aid before they came out, are busily spreading their infection throughout the world, wanting to shut down capitalism using any methods they can, even hoaxes. So this is a problem, and I request your help in solving it. I don't know which way it is, and I really don't know who is behind the global warming movement, if they're a bunch of crazies, or it's regular people led by a few intellectuals who just happen to be right, and that we've got to stop emitting carbon dioxide because the oceans can only warm so much. They've already warmed a half of a degree centigrade in the past 135 years. They can't possibly hold any more heat.